For this recipe, you will need 225 grams of caster sugar, 90 grams of unsalted butter at room temperature, 2 eggs at room temperature, and you can just leave these out overnight before you crack them into a bowl so that they come to the temperature that we need for this recipe. You'll need 225 grams also of plain flour, 15 teaspoons of cocoa powder, 2.5 teaspoons of white wine vinegar, and 3/3 of a teaspoon of bicarbonate of soda. I also have buttermilk here. We have 180 ml, and I've added some pink food dye to the buttermilk. We also add in our violet colour, but what I find is that if you add pink into the buttermilk, it takes the violet a lot better. We also need vanilla paste. So I'm going to sift my plain flour and cocoa powder together. And line 3 6-inch pans with parchment paper. We're going to add our butter and sugar into our mixer with the beater on. We're going to beat this at a medium high so that our butter and sugar is really light and fluffy. This is what we want it to look like. It's a lot lighter, all the sugar's been beaten nicely into the butter, and we have this lovely consistency. So we'll put the mixer back on at a medium high, and we're going to add our eggs one by one. We want to slowly incorporate these into our mixture and stick with this rule for every cake that you make, and you just really can't go wrong. So we'll get that nicely whipped in, all incorporated. We don't want our mixture to curdle at all here. And what I do find is that you should have your mixer up medium to high. So here's my buttermilk, and we've added our pink dye. Like I've said, this actually really improves and enhances the colour of the purple. Sometimes when you add purple food dye straight to a batter, it can come out a little bit grey. So the pink just ensures that we get this lovely purple colour that we want for our Halloween bake. So I'm just going to add some food dye in, and the reason I add my colour to my buttermilk, even with my typical red velvet recipe, is it gives me a better idea of the colour that the cake will turn out like. If you were just to add this colour straight into the batter, it can be very hard to determine the final colour, and it just incorporates a lot better when you add it to your liquid mixture. So I'm going to put a little bit more in here. Also, please keep mind of the guidance on the back of these food dyes, because they do tell you your limit of food dye and how much you should be adding into each bake. It does make for very hyper children if you add too much. So I'm just going to mix that nicely in. Yeah, that's the colour that I want. That's really perfect for Halloween. So first of all, we're going to add about half of our dry ingredients into the mixture. And then we're going to add half of our buttermilk mixture. And then we just get the beater back on without flinging this all over the kitchen, and start working that mixture nicely in. So just put this on a low speed, and we just want to mix this until everything's incorporated, and then we'll do exactly the same again. We'll add our dry mixture and finish off with the last of the buttermilk. If you were to increase the size of this recipe, then you would just do this in 3 or 4 stages. So again, we're just going to mix that in really nicely and just add the last of the buttermilk. Look at that colour. Perfect. Now at this stage, I do like to add a good squeeze of vanilla bean paste. You can use vanilla extract or paste, it's completely up to you. I find this really convenient. Now, we need our raisin agent. So we're going to add our bicarb into our white wine vinegar. And look at that bubbling away. And this is the last bit that we want to put into our red velvet cake. So we'll just put that into there. And then we're going to whip this on a medium to high speed for at least 2 to 3 minutes. We really want to get that mixture working and make sure that the raisin agent is really incorporated in, so our tiers can rise really nicely in the oven. So set your oven as on fan to 150 degrees, and then we want to split our mixture into 3 pans. So just put equal amounts into each pan, and I do like to just flatten mine down. And those will go in the oven for about 35 minutes on 150 degrees. After about 20 minutes you might want to check them, so just put a knife in, and if it comes out clean, your cakes are ready. Now on to making our little gooey meringues. So you want 75 grams of egg whites. I use the carton egg whites, but you can crack eggs open, that's absolutely fine. And we're going to line a baking tray with some parchment paper, and we are going to add 150 grams of caster sugar. So just lay this out onto the tray, and we're going to put this in the oven for around 3 minutes at 180 to 200 degrees. Just keep an eye on this, we don't want it to caramelize, we're just warming up the sugar so that it dissolves into our egg white mixture. So while that's in the oven, let's just get the mixer on nice and slowly, and we're just whisking the egg whites up so they have a nice foamy texture. Already you can see very quickly that our eggs have got all the bubbles and we're starting to get air into them. So I'm going to turn that up a little bit higher now, just to get you through to the stage that we want. And you'll see they're going nice and foamy. We're not looking for stiff peaks yet because we need to add our sugar. So this is kind of the consistency we're looking at. And this is the true test. You want to turn the bowl upside down, and if none of this foamy mixture comes out, we're good to go. So on a low speed, we're going to just add our sugar a tablespoon at a time. So this sugar is nice and warm from the oven. Make sure you have your oven gloves on, and we'll slowly add this into our mixture. And what happens is that the heat of the sugar will allow the sugar to dissolve a little bit quicker into our egg whites. Once all the sugar's incorporated, we want to turn the whisk up nice and high and keep that whisking for about 5 to 7 minutes until we have a lovely mixture with stiff peaks. So I have a large round tip nozzle here. I put this into my piping bag, and what we're going to do is we're going to add some black food dye strips into the bag. So I'm just painting these through onto our piping bag. Now, word of warning here, I made the mistake of using the gel based food colouring, and it's such a thick colouring that it didn't come through as well when I piped the meringues. So if you can use a more liquid based colouring, that is much better. So at this point we want to make sure that the meringue is very smooth and there are no grains in the texture. We're going to now fill up our piping bags with our meringue mixture and then start piping out our lovely little ghost. So what you want to do is add quite a bit of pressure, and then as you pull away, release the pressure that you're adding, or add less pressure. And this can take a little bit of practice, but don't worry too much, because as you pull away we get a really lovely ghost effect. We get this nice little twirly top. So even if they're a little bit messy, I wouldn't worry, because it is a Halloween cake and we're kind of going for something a bit fun and spooky. And I'm going to do the same with my black and white mixture. So again, mine were a little bit runny, and that was purely down to using the wrong food colouring. But again, like I say, we're making this look spooky anyway. So just quite a bit of pressure as you go down onto your parchment paper, and then releasing the pressure and pulling away quickly to get that lovely little twirly top. that was the swirly one. Just a little bit more. There we go. And what you can do is also play around with different piping nozzles. So I have a star tip here and I'm kind of making these cute little star shapes as well. So if you have any leftover meringue, it's fun to play around because you'll have some extra decorations to add to your cake. You can even do a little rosette by starting from the center and swirling round so that you get this lovely little rosette style here. These go in the oven at 100 degrees for about 30 minutes. You want to be able to take these very easily off of the parchment paper when they're ready, and they shouldn't be wobbly or gooey when you touch the tops of them. Now, unfortunately, my oven was a tiny bit too high, which I didn't realise, which is why mine have a few little cracks at the bottom. Again, don't worry too much about that because we are going for a very spooky cake. So again, I like to just say that it will add to the effect. So we have these really cool edible googly eyes, and I'm going to add 2 little dots of royal icing onto my meringues and put on the googly eyes, so they'll just stick on nicely with that royal icing. So I just have a number 1 piping tip in this bag and just press that one on there and they should stay. And I'm going to do the same with the other meringues. So I've made 2 types of meringues here. I've done white little ghost and I've done black and white ghost just to kind of add a contrast. And yet again, we're going to stick on our little edible googly eyes. And we're going to do this with the rest of the meringues. And here they go. Ready to go on our cake. So here's our purple velvet. Now I'm using a vanilla Swiss meringue buttercream to fill these tiers. You can use any filling that you wish, cream cheese frosting, chocolate ganache, white chocolate ganache, whatever you fancy, or traditional American buttercream frosting. I love Swiss meringue buttercream, so that is my choice of filling here. And we're just going to fill up those tiers, be very generous with your buttercream because why not? And then we want to add our crumb coat first of frosting. So we'll just layer that all up nicely over our cake, covering all those layers and just making sure there are no crumbs that are going to get loose and get into our icing because we want a really lovely smooth finish. I use a little bit of titanium dioxide in my buttercream just to make it a bit whiter. So just tidying up those tops, and I'm going to put that in the fridge. Now I have this comb by Wilton that has this kind of jagged square edge. This is just what you need to make the stripes in your buttercream. And I've got a very thick layer of frosting that I've added after chilling my cake. I'm going to take my bench scraper and I'm just going to smooth out this final layer of frosting. So we're just taking it all the way around, trying to do this in one swoop so that we get a really neat and tidy finish. So we'll just go around that again and just smoothing off the sides of the cake. Now I've got a few little gaps here, you can see where the frosting isn't level, so I'm just going to go in with my palette knife and some more buttercream and just fill those in, and then I'll go around again with my bench scraper in one scoop or one swoop and tidy all of that up. You want your buttercream when you do the second layer of frosting to be fairly thick because we are going to be scraping into this again to add the colour or our candy stripe effect as it is. So I'm just going to go around again and smooth that all out so it looks really wonderful. Now I'm going to take my comb and I'm going to do exactly the same thing we did with the bench scraper. You want to do this in one swoop, and we're just going to take this at an angle all the way around the cake. Now don't worry too much about those little bits that are hanging off because we're just going to kind of wipe those in as we go. I've got my bag with my number 5 piping tip, and this is filled up with my orange coloured buttercream. Again, use any colour that you want. You could maybe use purple, maybe go with a black, or even a Halloween neon green. And what we're doing here is we're actually just piping into those grooves that we've just caused. So you want to pipe into the inner groove. Now you need to have a little bit of a steady hand and quite a bit of patience. Again, don't worry if it's a little bit wobbly, because it's going to make it look really funky and spooky. So we're not too worried there. I'm not going for a completely super neat and exact finish to my buttercream cake, because I want to just add a very fun, easy effect to this cake. So we're just going into every single layer and filling that up with our orange buttercream. So now we're going to take our bench scraper, get it nice and angled against the cake, nice and straight, and take it round in one swoop. Now, because I'm using Swiss meringue buttercream, I haven't chilled the cake between stages when combing through the buttercream. And that's purely because I find that Swiss meringue buttercream does tend to scrape away a bit. You probably get away with chilling it in between layers if you're using American frosting. So again, I'm just going to kind of tidy this up and just kind of really scrape in where there's a little bit of orange that has blended into the white. But I'm not too worried, if I'm honest. I quite like the effect. And we're just going to tidy up that edge just using my palette knife just to kind of take the edges off. Again, don't worry about this being really neat and perfect, because we're going to add black drips all over the top of this cake. So you're not going to see those edges. You want to chill this cake, so it's really nice and cold before we start adding the black drips to the top. So I'm just taking off the rest of that buttercream and getting a nice smooth top to our cake. These boards are incredible. They're called Mason boards, and I order those online, and I will be setting my Halloween cake on top of that board. Now I have a large star tip. I filled the bag with more orange buttercream, and I'm going to do a really lovely swirl just around the side of the bottom of the cake, just to add a little interest, make it look a little bit more luxurious and fun. But of course we need sprinkles. I get these from Baking Time Club on Etsy. They have a really cool mixture of sprinkles, and I've got these little witches hats and green baubles and sugar strands. I like to put my sprinkles into a tiny little cup just to make it a lot easier to sprinkle these onto my buttercream when I am doing this on the bottom of the cake. So just put as many sprinkles as you love in any colour that you want. Be creative. You can never have too many sprinkles. This stuff is incredible. It's chocolate drip in Midnight Black, and you basically just microwave this bottle for 30 seconds and then shake it up really well, and this little nozzle on top helps you get the perfect drips down the side of your cake. So once it's nice and warm, you want to just funnel this down the side of the cake. You can be as particular or as messy and organic as you want. So you can just do one side of the cake, just one edge, or you can do the entire cake. So you can both be a little bit neater if you want. So on one side I've just let it run all the way down the cake over the edge of my piping, because I want it to look really gothic and creepy and spooky. But if you want to be a little neater, that's not a problem at all. This is completely up to you. And there we have our black drips. I love this product so much. And now we just need to add our little meringues. So I'm going to do a little pattern. I'm going to do white, then my black and white, then white, then black and white again, and so on. So my little googly-eyed ghouls to the top of my cake. I mean, the best thing about this is when you get a slice of cake, you also get a big dollop of meringue on top. A nice crunchy little meringue bite that looks like a ghost. Who could ask for anything more? And I'm just putting these onto the side. I just think this looks so fun and so effective, and who wouldn't want a slice of cake like this? Then just squidge them all on. We'll make them fit, and there we go. That's looking really funky. But we do need to add something to the center of our cake because it is looking a little bare. So I'm going to just add more sprinkles. And how cute are these? They're like little apples, I think little poison apples, little witchy hats, and these little crystals as well. Super fun. But of course, let's make sure this does look like a purple velvet cake inside. Drum roll, please. Here it is. That special moment. Is it purple inside? Perfect. Purple velvet cake. So you're ready for your Halloween tea time treat.